Hey guys, welcome to TEC-X. This is the first video on this channel after a long time, and also the first video of 2022. Today we will look into how to integrate Firebase with a Flutter app from scratch and build a login and registration system using the traditional email and password. I know that there are a lot of Firebase tutorial videos out there showing you how to integrate it with Flutter, but I found that most of them are currently outdated. Even two of my own written tutorials are currently outdated. And what's a better way to start the new year than Flutter and Firebase? So let's get started. To get started, first navigate to the Firebase console. Click on Add Project. You have to enter a name for your project. So let's enter Flutter Fire Demo. Click Continue. On step 2, it asks whether you want to Google Analytics for the project. As this is just a test project, so we will disable Google Analytics. But if you are working on a production application, you should always enable the Google Analytics. Then click on Create Project. This will just take a while to create the Firebase project. Okay, so now your project is ready. Click on Continue. And this will lead to the dashboard of your Firebase project. Now let's go to the terminal and create a Flutter project. So you can use the command flutter create. Then if you want, you can pass the organization domain. So I will just pass here my domain. And let's give it the name Flutter Fire Demo. Let's put underscore here and press enter. So this would create a Firebase project and you can open it using your favorite IDE. Let me open up using VS Code. So this is just the Flutter demo counter app that Flutter creates by default. As in this project we don't need the counter apps, so let's remove the parts that are not needed. Let me remove the comments over here. And let's remove this title inside the home page and let's just pass a scaffold here. So this is just to simplify the project, and let's also run it on an iOS simulator. So as you can see, we have the empty app running on a iOS device. I mean the iOS simulator. And also let's change this title to Flutter Fire Demo. Let's start by integrating Firebase to the project that we created. Currently the Firebase team have updated their implementation method and made it even simpler. If you go to the Flutter Fire overview page, you will find that they have introduced a Dart-only initialization. So with this you don't need any manual steps, like you don't need to generate the Google services.json, and for the Android and for iOS you don't need to generate the Google service info.plist file, and so you don't need to perform any of those steps on the platform side. You can just enable them directly from the Dart itself. So let's try to do this. Go to your terminal and first make sure that you have the Firebase Cli installed. You can use this command to check if the Firebase Cli is installed or not. If the version gets printed out, this means that you have the Firebase Cli installed. So if you don't have the Firebase Cli installed, Then you can navigate to the Firebase CLI reference page, and from here you will get all the steps required to install it on your current platform. I will put all the relevant links in the description of this video. Now let's get back to the project. Once you have the Firebase CLI installed, you need another CLI that comes from Flutter Fire. And if you navigate to their Flutter Fire overview page, you will find the command to activate it. So we will use this command. Instead of Dart, you can just use Flutter here if Dart is not present in your path. So I already have it activated, so you can see here that Flutter Fire CLI is already activated. So if you don't have it activated, this will activate it globally for all your projects. Now before starting the Firebase configuration for the Flutter project, make sure you are logged into Firebase using the CLI. So for that you can use Firebase Login. So you can see that I have already logged in, and if you haven't logged in using this CLI, so if you type this command, it will open up a web page. From there you can log into the current Google account that you are using for Firebase. So after this, you can move on and configure your Flutter Fire plugin. So you can use this command Flutter Fire configure and run this. So this displays a list of all your Firebase projects, and you can scroll up with the arrow keys here and just select the project that you have just created. So ours is Flutter Fire demo. To select, just press enter. Now you have to select the platforms for which you want to generate the configuration. So we can select all the platforms and just press enter. This will generate all the required configuration files for each of this platform. So you can see this has generated all the required configuration files for each of this platform in this Firebase options.dart file. So if you go here, you can see there are currently some errors because we haven't installed the Firebase core plugin. So let's just install it first. You can use the command flutter pub add and followed by the name of the plugin. This will add the Firebase core plugin, and you can see all the errors are fixed now. You will see in this file all the configurations for each of the platform are generated. And if you go to the Firebase console and refresh this page, you will find all the configurations for each of the platform are generated and registered on Firebase. So if you go to your project settings, you will find all the configurations for each of the platform. Now let's get back to the Flutter Fire docs and let's scroll down a bit to this initialization section. So here you will find how to initialize Firebase in your Flutter project. So you have to put this inside your main function. So let's do this. And you have to also make this async and make sure you import the required Firebase plugin and also import the configuration file that we just generated. In order to use Firebase Authentication, you need another plugin, that is Firebase Auth. So let's get back to the terminal and install that plugin. For that we will again use flutter pub add followed by the name of the plugin, that is Firebase Auth, and press enter. And this will add the plugin to your perspec.yaml file right here. Now you can get started by defining the authentication logic required for handling the sign-in and registration using email and password. But before that, let's add the UI required for this sign-in and registration. And in this video, we will mostly focus on the authentication logic. So I have already defined a UI. So let me just add it to this project. We will create a new folder inside the lib folder called screens. And let me just paste the UI code here. And we will also add another folder called utils. And we will have our text field validators here. So let's define a file called validator.dart. And let's add the validator logic here. So this is a simple validator for name, email, and the password. So for validating the email, I am using a simple regex. And for password, I am just checking if the length is less than 6, then it will give an error. So the password length has to be 6 or higher than 6. And let's get back to the register page. And you can see there are a few errors. Let us fix those. It's because the files are not correctly imported. So let me just import the correct validator file. And here also same. Just import the validator file. And also this register page. Okay, so let me just go to the main.dart file as well and call the login page here. Okay, and let's change the color to deep orange maybe. If you are running your Flutter app with Firebase on any iOS device, then there is one step you should perform. So go to the iOS folder and the pod file and uncomment this platform line and specify the platform version as 10. Now go to your terminal and go inside the iOS folder. Here just run pod repo update. Now you can go back to your main.dart file and run your Flutter app as usual. Okay, so let's take a look at the login page first. So inside the login page, we have a form. So inside this form, we have two text fields. One is for taking the email and the other one is taking the password as input from the user. And then we have the sign in button for starting the login process. Then we have another text button. This is for taking the user to the register page if he or she hasn't already registered inside the application. So if you click on this button, it will take you to the register page. And let's have a look at the register page as well. This is also a similar page, and this has a form, and this has 3 text form fields respectively for name, email, and password. And then we have the sign up button for registering the user. And this is the place where we need to put the logic for the sign up process. Now that you have got familiar with the UI a bit, Let's move on to the logic of the authentication. So for that we will define another file called authentication client dot. Let's start by defining the authentication client class. So first of all, we will create an instance of the Firebase Auth. So for that you can use Firebase Auth and create an object of it. And you can use the Firebase Auth.instance for creating the object. And we will also create a user object here, but we won't initialize it now. And we will have two methods here, one for registering the user called register user, and another one for logging in the user. And also we can have a logout method as well for signing out of. This would help the user to sign out of the already logged in account. We will pass 3 parameters to the register user method. So the first one would be name. The second one would be the email. And the other one would be the password. And let's also make this method async. Now inside this method, we will first use this auth object and call create user with email and password. And this method would take 2 parameters as input, the email and the password. This method would return a user credential object. So let's store it inside user credential. And now we can assign this user credential to the user object that we have defined here. User credential.user. Let's make it user credential. And we have to also use await here, as it is a future call. Okay, so now we have all the errors sorted out. And we have taken the name as a parameter as well, so we will just add this name to this user. You can use the update display name method on the user object like this, user.update display name, and just pass in the name here. And let's use a bang operator here. Also, this is a future call, so let's use await over here. And let's assign the current user that we get from the auth object to the user variable that we have defined over here. And also let's put the entire thing inside a try catch block, as this will help you to avoid any errors and catch them. easily. So for now we will just print the log message for the error. And at the end of this method, we will just return the user. Also, instead of defining the user outside, let's also define it inside each of these methods, as we don't need to access it with the authentication client class. Now we have the register user method correctly defined. Let's move on to the login user method, and here we will just pass two parameters, that is email and the password, and you have to use required over here and also over here. And let's also make it async. Okay, for login in user, let's first define this user variable over here, and then let's create a try catch block again. So for login in a user, we can use the auth object and call the sign in with email and password method, and just pass in the email and password over here. So this will again generate a user credential object. And you have to use await over here. Now we can just assign the user credential dot user to the user variable that we have defined here, and let's return the user object. And inside the catch we will just print the log message. Okay, so finally we will just define the logout user. So firstly make it a async, and for logging out a user we can just use auth.signout method, and you have to call it with the await, and this will just sign out the user from the current session that he has logged into. Now that we have all the methods defined inside the authentication client class, let's go back to the login page and let's perform the login process over here. So for doing the login, we have to first initialize the authentication client object. So let's define a final variable here called auth client, and let's initialize it as authentication client. Now we can use this object and let's call the login user method, and this method takes two parameters, one is email and another one is the password. So we can get access to this email text from this text editing controller that we have assigned to the email. Well, let's use this email controller, and we can get access to the text using this dot text. And similarly for the password, we will use the password controller and call dot text over here. And this should be a async method, so let's make this onPressed as async, and let's call it with await. Now to track the progress when the login is currently processing, let's define a boolean over here called is progressing, or just is progress, and let's initialize it to false. Now just before starting the login process, we have to make that boolean as true so that we can show a indication on the UI. So before doing that, let's make the class as a stateful widget, because otherwise we can't use the setState call and update the UI. And also let's make it constant. Okay, so we will now update this is progress just before starting the login, and we will do it inside a setState call, and we will set this boolean to true. And similarly, when the login completes, we will again use the setState call and set it to false. Now to show it on the UI, we have to show a progress indicator widget. So let's use the boolean over here, that is the is progress, and let's use the ternary operator. So when it is in progress, we will show a circular progress indicator. And let's make it const. So when it is in progress, it will show this indicator, otherwise it will show the button that is over here. Similarly, we have to do it for the register page as well. So let's go to the register page, and over here we have to again define a authentication client object. Let's define a final variable over here and initialize it to authentication client. Now we can use it to call the register user method, and so this will take 3 parameters: name, email, and password, and we have controllers for each of them. So let's use the name controller dot text to get the text for the name. Then similarly for email, we have to use email controller dot text, and for password we have to use password controller dot text. And we have to again make it async and call it with await. And similarly, to track the progress, we will again define a bool over here. So similarly, we have defined a circular progress indicator when it is in progress, and when it is not in progress, we will show this sign up button. We should do one more thing over here. This register user should return a user object. If we go to this register user method, we can see that we have returned this user object. So we should check if the user object is null or not. Let's go back to the login page, and let's store this value that we get from here inside a final variable. And as the progress completes, let's add a if statement to check if the user is null or not. So if the user is not null, we will just navigate the user to this home page. So let's define a navigator over here. And we are using here push and remove until, because we want to remove all the screens including the register or the login page before moving on to the home page. So let's define the route over here. And we will route the user to the home page. And we will pass the user to this home page. And here we are using false because we want to remove all the routes that are present below it. Okay, so this will navigate the user to the home page once the login process completes. And we have to add the similar thing to the registration process as well. Let's copy this part over here and let's paste it here. So we have to get the user object from here. And let's import this class and also the home page class. Okay, so this completes the login and the registration part in the Flutter app. Now let's go back to the Firebase console and let's go to this authentication page. So here click get started first of all. Now you have to enable the email and password login and registration, otherwise you won't be able to use this Firebase service. So click on this email password and enable this and click on save. Okay, so this should enable the email and password login, and now you should be able to use it within the app. So first let's register a new user over here. Let me enter my name and an email. Let's enter a password over here. And click sign up. As you can see, we have been navigated to the home page, and if you go to this home page, you can see that we have included this as the text, the user ID, the display name and the email. And you can see here the username, the email and the UID is displayed over here. So the registration process is completely working. Now let's restart the app and we will also try the login. Now as the user is currently registered, you can go to the Firebase console and go to the users section inside the authentication page, and you should be able to see the user who is currently logged in. Using also the user UID will be displayed over here. Now let's try login in using the email and password that we just registered. So first let's try with a wrong password and let's click on sign in. So as we have not shown anything on the UI, so you should be able to see it on the console, as we had included a log statement, and you can see here the password is invalid printed over here. And if we make the password shorter than 6 characters and click on sign in, you should be able to see this error message, as we had included a validator to this field. Now let's enter the correct password and let's click sign in. And we are again navigated to the home page, and you can see the UID, name and email. So the authentication is completely working now. Currently for signing out, we don't have any button on this page. So let's modify this page and let's add a sign out button over here. And before that, let's make this text a bit bigger so that it's visible on your screen. Okay, so now it looks better. To add a new button, let's first remove this center widget and let's wrap this text widget with a column. And let's align this column to the center using the main axis alignment as main axis alignment dot center. And below the text widget we will add another widget. So this will be a elevated button. And as the child we will use a text widget and give the text of sign out. Let's add some text style over here to make the text a bit bigger. Also, we will wrap this elevated button with a sized box and give it a width of double dot max finite, so it will extend to the entire width of the screen. And let's wrap this column with a padding of 16 so that it looks better. And also let's add a padding over this text widget inside the button. Okay, and let's add a spacing between this above text view and the sign out button with a sized box widget and giving the height of maybe 24 pixels. And let's make this constant and also the padding as const. Okay, so to sign out the user, we have to again create one object of the authentication client. So before that, let's make this a stateful widget because we will again need to use set state over here. And let's create the auth client object over here. And let's initialize it to the authentication client. Now we can use this object inside the onPressed method and call the logout user method over here. And again we have to use await and make this async. Now let's add a boolean to track the progress when the logout is in progress. So let's add a boolean as is progress. Initialize it to false. Then we will use the set state call and set it to true. And after the logout completes, we will set the is progress to false. And let's also add a progress indicator. And make it const. Okay, so this should do the job. And after the user logs out, we will navigate the user to the login page. So we will define a navigator over here. And we will again use the push and remove until method because we want to remove this home page and just push the login page. So let's define the material page route. And inside the builder, let's call the login page. And we can use const over here. And the route will be false because we want to remove all the pages that are below the login page on the navigation stack. Let's hot reload, and now let's try signing out the user. So let's click this button, and you can see it's almost instantaneous and the user gets signed out. That's all for this video. Firebase provides various other authentication methods like phone OTP, Google sign-in, Apple sign-in, sign using Twitter, GitHub, and a lot of other providers. In the upcoming videos, we will try to explore some of the other authentication methods. Also, I will upload the code for this app that we created in this video to GitHub. You will find the link in the description. And thanks for watching. If you learned something from this video, please drop a like below and also subscribe to this channel. Hope to see you on the next one. Bye.